Hello and welcome to another episode of It's There with, let's do it this time, with George Hamilton.
And Connor Phillips.
I want to start by asking you a rather personal question.
Okay.
I'd seek out the Clive Tilsley episode of It's There if you get an opportunity, if you haven't already. And in that, there's you allude ever so slightly to the fact that you commentators like to, have a bit of an enjoyable time once the microphone is off. Have you had the privilege of doing the same with many players down through the years before they had disappeared into the retirement ether?
Well, in terms of doing it, having nights out with players, it happened most at the start of my, let's call it, international commentating career, where the management didn't view the press as hostile, and there wasn't the same degree of media management as there is now. And there was access to players and management, the like of which there is not anymore. So you find yourself staying in the same hotel as the team, having flown in the same aircraft as the team, and you felt very much like part of the family. And certainly during the Jack Charlton years, it was very much part of the family. You're one of us, so you're welcome here. And it also helped because you got the opportunity to buy Jack a drink. And Jack didn't feel obligated to buy you one back because everybody was buying Jack a drink. So
it's the opposite of our guest actually today. So the reason I asked that is because I don't sort of hang around with too many superstars or celebs, but our guest today is one of the few guests that we've had that I've had the opportunity to socialise with. And the story that we're going to tell today is one that we've told to each other many, many times, whether it's in a lock-in in a random bar in Manchester or just one of those nights out. Today's guest is an absolute stalwart.
And an international football royalty when we get to the stats bit, because there are only 3 others who have amassed more appearances for his country than our guest today. It's astonishing when you look at the achievement of this man, proud Irishman, who made that very clear at the very start of his career when he got a call up for England and he said, "No, thank you very much. I'm Irish." And so it is with great delight that we say good day to Mr. Mayo, Kevin Kilbane.
George, Connor, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I bet I was going to spit my coffee back into the cup there, George, when you were saying that to me. So, yeah, I'm glad you said the stats, not the player himself. The stats can maybe tell you one thing, but as you well know, the stats are always misleading.
Yeah, I'm not a great stats man myself, but when you get past 100 caps, Kevin, you've done something absolutely remarkable. And to think that you did that, and you did it almost unobtrusively, because you were there, you were the stalwart, you were the outside left, and then you were the left back, and you were one of these first name of the team sheet guys. It was terrific from the very start when Mick McCarthy chose you in the first place to when your international career ended. Well over a decade later.
Yeah, I do feel very lucky, and I probably would have spoken to Connor more so about it. I do feel very lucky and privileged that I've been able to. I always say I was lucky to play once for Ireland, let alone the amount of times that I did actually play for Ireland. And to get over 100 caps, I'm still the only non-Irish born player to get 100 caps for Ireland. And it does make me very proud knowing who I was as a child and where I saw myself, who I saw myself as to play so many times. So I'm very lucky. And I do recognise throughout my career as well, there was probably players that had certain things that would have happened to them, maybe injuries or off the field stuff that would have maybe worked in my favour that helped me play at times when I wasn't necessarily going to play. And I was probably right place at the right time, George. That's the way I'd maybe describe it. But to be part of something so special for such a long time, it's incredible for me. Yeah, definitely.
Well, the way in which we'll separate the podcast, and we have done, it's worked quite well, is we spend the first half of the podcast talking about your club career. It's extensive and as impressive, and then we'll do the second half. We will talk about the memories. I'm sure we'll tap on those 110 caps. I'm sure Saipan will make its way in here in some way, shape, or form. Let's talk about the start, right? Because Preston was the club, and a young man by the name of Sam Allardyce surprisingly played a big role in that early bit that people don't normally link the two up.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. Big Sam, before he became my youth team coach, he was caretaker manager at Preston for a short while, and then he went over and managed Limerick City. I think they were Limerick City at the time. George would probably know more about this than I would have done, but he ended up being quite successful in the League of Ireland, and then he came back to Preston as youth team coach, with the potential for him to go on and then manage Preston North End first team, but that never worked out for him. And luckily for me, he came back when I was around about 15. So he coached me between the ages of 15, I think, and 18, something like that, Connor. And he was a big influence on me, certainly in the early stages of my career. Well, he's probably one of the biggest influences. I think anyone, and you guys will tell you, you always look up to someone with more experience, whatever industry you're in. And Big Sam, I used to watch him a little bit when I was a ball boy at Preston as a kid myself. And he was a huge influence on me. He really was. And then I know what you're alluding to here with the call up and how it transpired. We had quite a good youth team at Preston, and you guys probably wouldn't be aware, but probably the football fans that would have watched youth football over in the northwest of England, there would be A and B teams. So, for instance, Man United, Liverpool, Man City, going down to Bury, Burnley, Preston, whoever it would be in the northwest, Rochdale, would have in general had A and B teams. So your A team would have been lads that would have been coming back, professionals coming back from injury, that would have been looking to get more game time into them and things like that before they introduced back into maybe the reserves or the first team. It was like the third team essentially of the club. But we never had an A team at Preston because the club couldn't afford to run one. So we just had a B team, which the B team in general was youth team players from all those teams I mentioned. And it would have been the best of the best really in the youth team. And we ended up winning the league that in my first season. We had a good side, as I said, and we were strong, and we probably played a certain way that sides found it difficult to play against us. And right at the end of that season, Big Sam's popping the champagne because we won the league and things like this. And we played, I think it was a Tuesday. It was definitely a night match anyway, Tuesday, Wednesday night, whatever it was. Sam's popping the champagne, lads, even though we weren't legally allowed to drink. I think we might have had a sip or two here of that. But anyway, Sam's popping the champagne and says, look, honestly, lads, I've got another real great announcement. You guys have been great this season. Thank you very much for everything. It's just been a total pleasure managing, coaching you boys across the course of this year. But the proudest moment of my coaching career so far just happened this afternoon. We got a phone call from England. One of our guys has been called up to the England youth setup, and obviously he's here amongst us now. So I'm kind of looking around the dressing room. Who could it be? Who's this guy going to be? Who it's gone? And he just said, Sam would have been one of Sam's favourite. He just looked at me, came over to me and said, Killer, it's you, my boy. Look, you've been called up. I can't tell you how proud this makes me. And I just froze. And I actually didn't say one word. I never said one word at the time. I kind of stayed involved in the celebrations with the guys because we just won the league and things like that. And the following day we were in, because we always had the jobs in those days as a YT at Preston. The first team would have been training. So we would have had to maybe clean the dressing rooms and do our normal jobs that we would have had to do. So I don't think we trained that day because we would have had the game that night, but we would have done our jobs as normal at the club. And all throughout that day, I'm just saying, I have to tell him. I can't and won't play for England. It's just not me. It's not who I am, but I'm going to have to tell him. I'm going to have the conversation. And given how excited he was for me and how proud he was for himself that he coached a player, his first player that had got a international call-up, I kind of knocked on his door and went into the office and just said, Sam, look, I'm sorry, but I'm not English, I'm Irish, and I won't be playing for England. And that was, all hell broke loose, but that was the extent of the conversation, yeah.
It's an extraordinary story. It really is. And what we got to know Sam Allardyce as, man, a man that wasn't backward and going forward in the next 20, 25 years of how we'd all seen him as well. Forgive me. I don't know how to ask this question. How quickly, when the words fell out of his mouth, did your body go, absolutely not? How quick was that?
Well, that's why I would say genuinely, I was looking round the changing room. I was looking round to see who this guy could be. I didn't even think about it. And now, bearing in mind, I mean, I've heard a lot of guys, say that they had a choice to play for England or Ireland and things like this as non-Irish born people and things like this. There was no Ireland on the table for me. I hadn't had a call up. There was no even talk of me playing for Ireland at that time. I was only on the verge of the first team. I was only, I think, 17 at the time. So there was no talk of Ireland. There was no international call up elsewhere for me. There was nothing else that was on the horizon. The plan down, down the line would have always been to play for Ireland. But you guys know as well as I do, you've watched enough football over the years to see young players come into the game. The chances of you actually going on to play international football are so slim that you've got virtually no chance to go on and play, no matter what level that you're playing at. And you might be fortunate enough one day to get a call up at that in that respect. And in some respects from that was probably me being fortunate that I got an international call up. But I just, as soon as I answer your question, Connor, as soon as he uttered the words, I knew in myself it just wasn't me. I could never have done it. And maybe going back to those days as well, times were a little different. I grew up in a very different sort of world at that time as well. So for me personally, I was just Irish. No matter where I was born, no matter who it was, I was just Irish. So I couldn't possibly even contemplate it. So I just didn't. It kind of, went into my ear. I digested everything that he was saying, and I was trying to take everything on board, but I knew full well that it was never going to happen. So it was a non-starter right from those first words, Connor.
Brave, George.
Brave
I mean, I think as we're not working on the BBC, Connor, I can probably say what he said, can I? I don't know. But Sam kind of rose from the desk when he said to me, I think Sam was just he was so upset that I went to see him to say to him, I remember I knocked on his door. In those days as well, Sam didn't really have an office as such in the club. Football's changed. Preston used to have a row. If anyone ever went to Deepdale back in those days, it was the AstroTurf pitch. We still had the AstroTurf down at Preston. We were the last team playing in England to have an AstroTurf pitch as the main pitch. So on I'm trying to think, the Gill Club stand, I can't remember, and it had the paddock, I think it was the North paddock that was below it. But anyway, the Gill Club, in between the Gill Club and the paddock that was below, there was a row of executive boxes. Now, for Preston standards, they were not plush at all. There was probably about 10, 15 of those. And Sam's office was in one of those executive boxes. So I kind of went up, knocked on the doors, and as Sam says, come in, I opened the door. Oh, Kilo, come in. Oh, I can't tell you. Look, this is what's going to happen. You'll go here, you'll go there. And I just had to look, Sam. I can't remember what I said. My words. I was bricking it. I was shitting my pants. I really was. And I just said to him, Sam, I'm sorry, but I'm not going. I'm not English. I'm Irish, and I can't play for England. And Sam stood up from his desk, and Sam's intimidating now, but to me as a 16, 17-year-old boy, I was really intimidated by Sam, as everybody probably was at the club in those days. And he said, fuck off, get the fuck out of my office. Do you realise I've worked my whole career to get an England call up, and it never happened. I never got one at any level of England. He goes, get out of my office. And I kind of just ran out of the office, and I didn't know where to look, what to do. I just ran out of the office because he was just he was genuinely gonna kill me. And I ran off and went back downstairs and carried on with my job. He actually came down to me later on, and we spoke, and he understood where I was. And I do believe that he did call Mick McCarthy when Mick got the job down the line, and I ended up getting an under-21 call up a year or two after that, or a year or so after. So he did help me in the end, but I think the disappointment for him as a coach, that he'd had one of his guys coming through that he'd helped from the age of 14, 15 or whatever it was, he was with me, get an international call up, and I just kind of blew it out the water straight away.
Has Big Sam ever sworn at you?
No, he hasn't. No. Funny, Amanda, I never told him I didn't want to play for him.
That's true. You never did say, I'm gonna rip your heart out. But then how do you get yourself back in the mindset to go and play again, either under Sam and, to try and break through Preston, and then, to try and think, okay, this is one thing. We've just won this B League. We've done so well. There's so much drama going on here. There's this thing with Big Sam. but I got to get ready for the next season.
Yeah, I think, and again, you guys know this more than ever. Football just changes and evolves very, very quickly. Once one thing's done, you're moving on. If you're dwelling on what's happened in the past, you just get swept up in that, and before you know it, 6 months goes by and a year goes by, and you can quickly become forgotten. That's the way it was. And and at the time, I was a nobody. I was an absolute nobody. I hadn't played for Preston's first team. I hadn't been anywhere near it. Or I was probably close. I was close to it at the time, but I was still in that position of, where's his career going to go anyway? Like it would be for any young player. And Sam was such a big supporter of me, especially me. I always felt that, once that incident had happened and everything that went with that, we went back for the following season, because it was right at the end of that season anyway. The first team would have been playing certain games or whatever, finishing their season off. Sam was just like, right, you're going to get in the first team this season. That is your goal for the year now, and you're going to be a regular. That is what you have to become fully focused on. And Sam actually didn't stay around. Actually, he left quite shortly after that, when we'd gone back for pre-season. So I felt when Sam had left, I'd lost a big supporter of me personally. But I think the general feeling was, we had a manager and an assistant manager in those days that were really supportive of me, that they thought that, I had the ability to go on and carve a career in the game at whatever level that was going to be. And I honestly, everything that had happened, Connor, as soon as it had happened, it was done. I have to move forward now and concentrate on, my club career. And again, genuinely, as much as I was watching the Irish team at that time, I genuinely hadn't even thought about playing international football, because it was genuinely not even on the horizon. It was never there. So I didn't have an agent. Nobody had agents in those days. So I didn't even have anyone that could recommend me to go there and things like that. So there was no one that could even say, look, this guy's had an England call up, but you might want to look at him and things like that. It wasn't the time for that. There was no real support for players in those days. It was just about your own personal way and how you had to deal with things. And I just dealt with it of, look, I'm just fully focused on next season. And luckily enough, over the next few years, I did manage to break into Preston's team and establish myself from there, really. And then, and as I said, I got the international call up with the 21s.
You are a Preston lad, and it was your team. So how does that actually work? As Connor says, when it comes to the point where, did you want to go, or did they want to sell you, or how did that all come about?
I'd been at Preston, I think, from the age of 10 years of age. And I went right through the School of Excellence system as it was in those days. It wasn't an academy system in those times. At 14, you were able to sign schoolboy forms with the club, which I did at 14. At 16, I signed YTS forms. And then at, I think, 17, 18, you then sign professional terms. That's the pathway. It doesn't necessarily work out like that, but it kind of worked out like that for me. And then 97... there was talk of a lot of teams around then. There was a lot of clubs interested, and that was from Premier League level, right into the Championship. Good Championship clubs as well. And a lot of the Premier League clubs were making offers with a view to me being part of squads and maybe even less money for Preston at the start. And West Bromwich Albion came in, George, and kind of blew a lot of teams out of the water. They bid 1.25 million for me, and Preston hadn't had £1 million transfer at all, a sale, and they hadn't actually had, and West Brom hadn't had £1 million transfer as well that they'd bought. So for both clubs, it made sense economically, and I knew I wanted to go. That was the thing. I knew I wanted to go, but the nervousness of the move itself, that you got yourself to a level. But I kind of knew where I was. I knew who I was. I was growing quickly. And as I said, I got an international call up around that time as well, albeit I just had an operation, so I couldn't actually make the squad, I was more gutted about that than anything else. So that summer of 97, after the deal was struck, I ended up moving fairly quickly, actually. And I went on from there, and that was pretty much it, George.
You had some class teammates in that squad.
We did. We had some really good players. We had Northern Irish international James Quinn that was in our side there at West Bromwich Albion. I signed the same day as Lee Hughes. And if anything, lads, I think we severely underachieved. We under Ray Harford, who'd signed me. Ray was great for me. Ray was assistant manager at Blackburn, as everybody would probably know, when under Kenny Dalglish when they won the Premier League. And we'd just won the league at Preston, and we played Blackburn in a pre-season friendly. And I just one of those games where everything goes well for you. I was playing up against Henningberg, and I was giving Henningberg a bit of a runaround on the day. And it was pre-season friendly, but as a kid, when you're 18 or whatever, 19, and you're trying to make an impression, it made an impression on Kenny Dalglish and Ray Harford. Ray then left Blackburn after becoming manager, and he took over at West Brom. And he always said to me that wherever I was, he said we actually couldn't sign you at Blackburn because we actually had a better left winger than you, who was called Damien Duff, who was coming through the system. So
never heard of him. Never heard of him.
We weren't allowed to sign. We couldn't get the finances to bring you into the team. But Kenny and I both would have always wanted to take you wherever we went. And I ended up the first guy that got a manager's job. And luckily enough, I was able to go and bid for you and get you. And that was pretty much how it came about when the deal was struck. So I worked under Ray, and Ray was great for me as an attacking player, as I was in those days as well. He was great for me personally. I got the international call up almost immediately after I'd signed for West Brom as well. So everything went quickly. I mean, I mentioned that I made my debut for Preston in, I think, 95. By 1999, I was playing the Premier League. So it was 4 years, whatever it was, 4 years, over a 4-year cycle. I played in every single division in England, and I was a Premier League player. So everything happened so quickly for me, and become an international player as well during that time. So, going from a 17 boy with, wet behind the ears, frail, whatever you want, however you want to describe a young player, going from that to being 20 years of age, as getting a move to West Bromwich Albion, becoming an international footballer, everything happened so quickly. And the progression from me from 15 to 20 was, in terms of physical stature, in terms of technical development and everything that goes into becoming a footballer, that was so vast over those 3 or 4 years. For 15 to 25 years, I would say, it was such a massive improvement during that spell for me. So I was quite lucky that I had good coaches around me, good people around me, and people who were able to help me develop and go on from whichever position I was in.
I'd urge anybody to check out the Kevin Doyle interview that we had, the Kevin Doyle episode, something quite similar. Mm-hmm. There was a short space of time from when he was playing for Cork,
yes,
right through to playing in the Premier League,
yeah,
and trying to explain that sort of even in your own head.
The jump from one level to another, and all the steps in between, and how did that happen, kind of thing. And here, and suddenly here you are, and you're in the Premier League, and you're an international to boot.
But over a 5-year period, I think I played in every division of 4-year period. I played in every division of English football. And I kind of gone through the tiers. So I started, as I said before, in the old Division 3, got promoted, got a move to the Championship, then got a move to the Premier League. And I could probably, I always remember every level I could see a difference, as it's expected to be. But most people outside the Premier League tell you there's not much difference between the Championship and League One. There's not much difference between League One and League Two in England. But I could see it. I could generally, and as I was developing as a player as well, wherever I went to, I always seemed to take a little time to settle and become very familiar with surroundings and team and league I was in or whatever. But I could definitely see the improvement in quality with every move and every time that I'd stepped up a level. It was immense, really. I felt, George, and from League Two as it is now to Premier League, it was just such a vast difference, I felt. And once I'd got to the Premier League, I felt I did feel I was ready at the time. But I probably wasn't ready, and I probably need more time to develop. It comes back to the fact when I moved to Sunderland, and I told Connor the story where, and many people have heard it. I was actually saying this story today, so it sounds like you're very vain when you're talking about it. But I could have signed for Liverpool. I could have signed. Gerard Houllier was on the phone. He desperate to sign me for Liverpool, but he didn't say what I wanted to hear from him. He was just saying to me, and I was an international footballer. I was off the back of, you'll remember the games, George, Turkey in 99 when we played the 2-leg game against Turkey. And after the first leg in Dublin, where I felt as though I'd done quite well, I was really, even at international level, and you would know this more than ever, George, with me, that I did take a while to develop. I was nervous at the start. I remember being nervous, and it took me a while to become like I was established within just the training setup and being established within the squad. And I remember the 2-leg playoff that we had against Turkey. Steve Staunton came down after the game. He was injured for the match, Steve Staunton. He was at the game. Gerard Houllier had said to him, look, you have to get him. We want to sign him. Desperate to get him in. And then I'd spoken to Gerard Houllier. He'd spoken to me and my agent. And Gerard Houllier was just giving me the message of, you're going to come in, you're going to be part of the 16. You're not going to be playing. You're going to be playing the reserves. You'll come on off the bench the odd time. You'll play cup games for us. And in my head, I was thinking, look, I'm an established international player here. I want to play football. And Leeds were in at the time as well. There was no concrete offer from Leeds in terms of contract, but I think there was negotiations that was happening with West Brom. But Sunderland and Peter Reid just told me everything I wanted to hear. You're going to play every week, no matter what. We'll agree the fee. Wages all sorted quickly, all done and dusted. You're going to be my man. You're going to play every game. And when he said that to me, I wanted to play in the Premier League. And Sunderland were flying at the time. And that's all I wanted from my career. I wanted to play games. Looking back, I don't know if it was the right move. I don't know if I should have gone to Liverpool and helped my development. But all I wanted to do was play games. And then in saying looking back, was it the right move? I think looking back on my career, to play games for me was probably the best thing to do anyway. Play Premier League games and whatever, I don't know, I played around 100 games, I think it was, for Sunderland at the time, however it was, but they were all Premier League games, and that was more important for me than anything, to play as higher level as I could possibly play.
And to bring that experience into what was now a developing international career, because you're now an established player in the international team, never mind in the Premier League.
Well, I mean, I said to you there, George, you would have seen the development of me. I remember coming in as a naive boy, I think, when I was 20. I go back to the West Brom move. I just moved to West Brom, but I was still very naive, and I still needed to be worked on as a player. I still needed to develop. I had a hell of a long way to go in terms of development. So I had to, as much as, everything in my whole life growing up was playing for Ireland. That's all I wanted to do. Now, the club side, I didn't necessarily. You mentioned there about my team was Preston. All I wanted to do probably would play for Celtic, but play for Ireland above anything else. That's all I wanted to do. And if you'd have said to me, look, get one game for Ireland and you're done, would you take it at 15, 16? I would have said absolutely yes. That would have been the pinnacle of my life, the pinnacle of my career during my younger days. So all I wanted to do, and I put so much pressure on myself when I got into the international setup. What was it? The Iceland game now, going back to 97. I just was so nervous. I was so nervous in the squad. Guys who as much as I would have done at the time going in, George, you've been around them. You too, Connor, would have watched them a lot. Ray Houghton in the squad, Tony Cascarino, John Aldridge, Andy Townsend, Niall Quinn, Roy Keane. The list of names who were heroes to me was endless. And Steve Staunton, another one. And these guys were all around me in the squad. And I was still, honestly, I not so much pinching myself. I always felt I should be there. I felt as though I had the ability to be there. But I didn't necessarily fully believe that, if you know what I mean, if that makes sense. I didn't truly believe in myself that I should be around these guys. And I always felt a little bit intimidated by them because these were my heroes growing up. And when I was around them, incredible people, good friends, a lot of them. And when I speak to them now, it's great that they helped me develop as an international footballer. But I still needed to develop myself, maybe mentally, in so many different ways, just to become or feel like, right, okay, I am part of this now, and I should be here, like I probably did maybe 3 or 4 years later.
It sounds like the wish list for season 2 of the It's There podcast. I think he's just listed all the players we want to get in season 2. Sunderland, though, and if I look down your list of clubs here, right, apart from Everton for me, it is your second favourite team. Do you know, I remember West Brom. Everyone loved West Brom. Sunderland come up into the Premier League, did something very different. Wigan did exactly the same. So when you were playing at Sunderland, and obviously it's a massive place, and this was just probably before the Irish Renaissance happened at Sunderland, and you were playing Premier League football, was it all you thought it was going to be?
Probably the simple answer to that is no. I was probably, again, a little bit intimidated when I went into the Premier League. An inner belief, probably, and I don't know, something holding me back, Connor. I think that's what it was. I must mention Niall as well as one of my heroes. Niall's a friend, so I've got to say Niall's one of my heroes as well, isn't he? But but Niall was obviously at Sunderland. So I went into Sunderland, and Niall wasn't around actually when I first got into the international setup because he had that serious knee injury. So I signed for Sunderland, and Quinny was a huge influence on me, just in terms of I'd stepped up, and a lot was happening around Sunderland at the time. They had a left winger called Alan Johnson who'd agreed a pre-contract with Rangers, and he was going on big money to Rangers, and he was a huge fan's favourite, and I was going to replace him there at Sunderland. Now, I'm not saying that's an excuse. If you go to Sunderland and you play well, Alan Johnson's quickly forgotten about, but I went to Sunderland and didn't play well. So in not playing well, I felt there was so much pressure on me. There was a lot of interest on West Brom as a club. They were a big club, don't get me wrong. But when I signed for Sunderland, it was a different animal altogether. Wherever I went, whatever I was doing, it seemed like there was 10 people watching me, coming over to chat to me. Supermarket. I made the analogy. I remember I had a tin of baked beans in my shopping trolley. And a lady came over to me and said, "You shouldn't be eating baked beans. They're not healthy." Stuff like this. And wherever I went, it was just madness. You went out to go, say, supermarket, went out to the petrol stations, went out for a beer, went out for a restaurant. Whatever you were doing, there was people just all over you all the time. And I realized then when I'd signed for Sunderland that this is a huge club. I'd gone from almost a little bit of being anonymous. Nobody knew who I was, no matter where I was at. Even at Preston, in my hometown, where I grew up, it was still fine. You were still, people knew you for who you were, not Kevin Kilbane, the footballer. And when I was at Sunderland, that was totally different. And it was a big eye opener for me. And I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy everything that went with the move to the Premier League and the scrutiny, everything that went with it. Obviously you probably know it's going to come, knowing where you want to be and in life, but I maybe just didn't think about it the way that I should have thought about it. Maybe that when I wasn't playing well, the supporters was getting on me back a little bit, and I felt as though that every time that something started to go well, you take one step forward, two steps back, and the crowd didn't take to me and things like that. It just wasn't working out when I'd signed for Sunderland over that first year or two. It just didn't go well at all.
Frying pan and fire. So you decided to go, right, from Sunderland, 113 league appearances, 8 goals from 1999. Maybe it was Gerard Houlia's draw to Merseyside. But a different experience in the Premier League with Everton, but another club where, and George, like you if you play for Everton, like everybody on Merseyside knows who you are, like.
Yeah, whether they like you or alternatively don't like you, because it's Everton. Yeah, it's straight down the middle.
Sorry, I always liked him. He was wearing a green jersey, so he was all right. Once he played for Ireland, he was okay. I say this.
To be honest, I did want to sign for the biggest team in Liverpool. That was the ultimate ambition of me. That's why I turned down Liverpool all those years before,
This is an ongoing joke. We've got probably 7 or 8 years of this joke running around my ears. But that was a time when, and my family are Everton fans. My best mate, he's an Everton fan, and there's a huge Everton fan base from this island.
Yes.
And I did get to see what he was doing, like, even though it wasn't the team that I supported.
It's in my family as well, and I've no idea where it came from, but there is a staunchness about following Everton among relations of mine that I've just never quite gotten. My best pal from school, who now lives in Lancaster, and now retired school teacher. I mean, he goes to Everton because that's his team.
He's got sense, George. He's got sense. He's got a lot of sense.
But you had a great time there because you loved it there, and the fans loved you as well.
No, I did. I did, honestly. And I said before, probably famously when I was playing for Sunderland, I was playing in a pre-season game, and I was just getting dogs of abuse. I think it was just after the World Cup, actually. I was getting slaughtered, and I remember turning around and I flicked them the V's, and there was like a huge uproar. I'd been abused for this whole game, and I turned around, flicked them the V's, and everybody thought or thinks that I left after that incident. It was kind of like I was forced out of the club, which wasn't true. I stayed actually that full season, and it was my best season as a Sunderland player. Without a doubt, it was my best season. But Sunderland got relegated at the end of that year, and there was talks of other teams. Southampton were in very, very strongly actually through pre-season that summer. I think Gordon Strachan was manager at Southampton. I'm not saying I could have gone for Southampton, but it looked likely that that was going to happen at one time. Mick McCarthy had actually come to Sunderland at the end of that season as well, and we got relegated. And there was a lot of interest from different teams, but nothing firm. But David Moyes was always there. And I knew David Moyes since I was 15, 16 at Preston. He was a player at Preston, captain at Preston. Then he became assistant manager and then manager. He wasn't actually my manager, but he was a player assistant for a long time. And David was on to me. David and I would have spoke quite a lot over a number of different issues, whether it had been personal, whether it would have been, players that he might have liked to sign and things like that. What do you think of him, teammate, and things like this? So we would have always spoke over the years. And if there was any manager I would have wanted to play for, it would have been David. Without a doubt, would have been Moisey. I would have desperately loved to have worked for him. And it just came about that Everton needed players. He hadn't started the season particularly well. And if you remember, I know you'll remember very well, Connor. Do you remember the famous Steven Gerrard goal where he was kind of on the angle and he put it right back in the top corner at Goodison Park?
It was almost behind him, yeah.
Yeah, it was near the start of the season. I think it was actually August, and the transfer window had come into play then. So the transfer window was just about to close, and Everton had just lost the Merseyside derby. So there was a lot of questioning of Everton at the time, and they needed to sign players. So I went in the same day as Nigel Martin, James McFadden, myself. Franny Jeffers was signed back on loan from Arsenal. So we were kind of the deadline day signings just after that Merseyside derby. So it just, everyone, you think back across the course of your career at different stages of your life and all those sort of things. But for me personally, to have David come in, who I knew as a coach and as a manager, and as a person more than anything else, to be honest with you, because he was a big influence on me anyway. And then I had Lee Carsey there, Lee and I were really close in the international setup. And it was just the perfect environment. The people that we had, Alan Stubbs, David Weir, Gary Naismith, Duncan Ferguson, Wayne Rooney was there as well. We just had incredible characters, incredible people. And it was just a perfect time, I felt, to play for a team that suited my personality, who I was, the way that the team played to suit my style of play. It was just, I just love, honestly, I know I always laugh with you, Connor, the Reds and the Blues. I think there's so much respect for each team, really deep down, deep-rooted. I don't know, there's deep-rooted history between the two clubs, and going back 50, 60 years, people would have been going alternative to Goodison Park and Anfield week in, week out. But when I moved to Everton, as much as Sunderland was, it was a big club, I just sense moving to Everton, this is a team, this is a club that I don't know. I felt wanted there at Everton. I felt good being an Everton player. And it was just a great time that we had when everything went for us there. Everything went well for us, yeah.
Yeah, and they played good football as well, George. I say that with no hesitation. That Everton team, specifically under David Moyes, like there was never the chaos that has been there in the last 5 or 6 years.
No, I know. I think sorry to interrupt you there, but I think that regardless of the football that we had, you guys as well know as much as I do that characters invariably win games of football. And if you're losing games, characters are the people that's going to get you out of trouble. There was so many characters. I didn't mention Kevin Campbell. There was another one, Lord to mercy on him. Kevin was such a big influence on me as well. A great person to be around, Kevin. And people like that we didn't actually have a great season. I mentioned we came off the back of the derby, but it wasn't a great season. But we always felt the trouble that we were in. Everton were in trouble that year, big trouble, could have got relegated, but we had players and people to get us out of that struggle that we were in. And David Moyes was under a lot of pressure at that time. There was a lot of talk around him remaining in for the following season after that, but we had enough to get us out of that trouble we were in with the characters that we had off the field. And I think David Moyes recognised that more than anything, that he had real people, real strong leaders in that dressing room.
Did you play with Gravison?
Yeah, Tommy Gravison was there. Yeah, we had.
Is he as bonkers as people say?
Tommy's bonkers. Absolute stonewall crazy. I've said it before. I probably would have told you privately about it, Connor. But the one thing I always remember, I hadn't been at Everton that long, and the Mick Rathbone, who was my physio at Preston, he was the physio at Everton in those days. Baz as he was known, the fittest guy in the world, outrunning with the players and outrunning the players when he was outrunning with them as well. He was incredibly fit, taking the guys running around the training at Belfield, up the old training ground at Everton every day. And one day the guys are out running after we finish training, and Tommy Gravison is loading a drain pipe with fireworks. And he's lighting the fireworks and he's shooting them across the training ground like in a rocket launcher style thing at the guys that's on the opposite end of the field, firing across. And they're looking over. Tommy, like, he must have fired 4 at them, like right across the training ground at the guys when they're trying to do a run at the other side of the field. That was Tommy. Whatever you could do just to make something just crazy, Tommy would take it to a whole new level of craziness. It was just, Tommy was an absolute one-off. But I would say as well, one of the best players I would have played alongside. So talented, incredible footballer.
Kevin's club career, like we go Wigan, Hull, Huddersfield, and then a couple of loans towards the end. Like we're into the hundreds and hundreds, over 400 club appearances, and what we wouldn't give now for
400. No, I think 600 and something.
I was going to say Premier League appearances. My next point was going to be.
I don't think it was 600. Sorry, 400 Premier League. I think it was the threes. I think you'd be in the threes for the Premier League appearances. Yeah.
Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. Nobody's going to. Everyone's listening to this or driving their car, or they're not going to go and check. Right? We'll just keep it. We'll keep it north of 300. But my point, George.
Say 500 Premier League appearances.
Let's do. So, what we wouldn't give for Premier League quality like that now.
Well, this is it. Of course, the game has changed so much. But when Kevin was playing, there was the scope for an Irish international like him to be established over years and be a consistent performer without all the imports that are coming in now. And of course, it's turned it into a completely different animal, the Premier League. But when you were playing, there were Irish players here, there, and everywhere, and there was a strong squad of Premier League players and players with regular European exposure, which they aren't available to the current management now because of the way the game has evolved. But Kevin, in his time, you were able to take advantage of what was available to you and establish that longevity over a decade and a half to play at that level consistently and to end up with over 100 caps. I mean, it's a massive tribute to you that you maintained that level for that length of time.
Well, from you, that's very nice, George. Very nice. But I don't think we thought about it like that. I think that it was just a given that to get into the Irish side, you had to be a Premier League footballer. So ultimately, in my head, signing for Sunderland was going to continue with me being a Premier League footballer. And I know that I was in as a Championship player with West Brom, but ultimately, if you wanted to go and establish yourself as an international footballer, you had to be playing in the Premier League. That's the way that it felt to me. And I think ultimately now we know we don't have that. And I'm not saying we don't have the talent. We don't have as talented players. That's not necessarily the case because it's just the game has changed. As you touched on, George, the game has totally changed. We have gone so global now. We were moving that way while I was playing. You know, if I look at the guys coming over on trial from when I was at Preston, would have been perhaps non-league players in England or from Ireland or Scotland or whatever it would be, Wales, and it would have been from our islands. But the way that it changed from me even going to, say, West Brom over a few years to, you know, trialists would have been from all across the world at that stage. And then going into, obviously, later on at Everton and Wigan and Hull, wherever it would be, trialists were from anywhere. So you realise the way that the game's changed just in terms of that sort of reference there. But the whole demographic of a changing room was totally different from the start of my career to the end of my career. Totally different. And it's moved on from that now.
So on that, is that point I even made to George there now, is that slightly unfair? That if I'm saying, well, you know, Kev got all these appearances, played Premier League over 500 times, as we said, again, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. You know, are we unfair now saying to the players who are playing in decent championship sides, look, let's talk about Robbie Brady, right? Plays for your old club. Are we being unfair to him saying, well, he's not a Premier League player? Because, you know, the absolute, just numerically, for him still to be playing at that level is incredibly impressive, even though it might not seem like it used to.
Well, I know Robbie a little bit. When I was finishing up at Hull and I was coaching at Hull for a season, Robbie was starting to develop. He came on loan from Man United. So, in terms of ability and the guys that I would have been around in the international setup, Robbie Brady would absolutely have been in or around our international setup in terms of ability and everything like that. So, in answer to your question, I think it is unfair now a little bit on the guys that the game has changed so much. As I said, I'm not saying that's the case for everybody, because if I look at some of the guys that didn't make our side that were established, Rory Delap. Rory's probably played 300 or 400 Premier League games. I don't know. George might even know the number of international caps, but Rory wouldn't have got more than 15, I don't think. Definitely no more than 20. Rory Delap couldn't get in the international setup, and he was a regular every week in the Premier League. Graham Kavanagh would have been another one that didn't get an awful lot of caps. Brilliant footballer, not recognised for the ability they've got. Mark Kinteler, who... He's probably one of the most talented players that I would have played alongside. Mark would have been, and he was another one that doesn't necessarily get the credit he deserves. So I'm not seeing that type of player within our setup right now. So that aside, I think, just to answer your question, I think it is a little unfair, because I think a lot of the players would have been in the international setup, but I think the game has changed that much that it's so much harder now for anybody at any level now to develop and go and have a career. I always look back at my own career, and honestly, and I do feel I underachieved in my career for maybe the ability I had. And I had to just change my whole game to be a bit of a survivor, whether that be in Premier League level or even at international level. George mentioned before, going from left side to left back. I played a little bit in the middle of the park as well, but predominantly you do what's needed to stay in the team. And I think a lot of maybe modern day coaching and football is not necessarily giving the players the tools of, this is how you have a career. It might not, it isn't your ability. It generally isn't your ability. It's staying in the team and recognizing what the manager wants from you and doing that every single game that you play. It's not necessarily you going out and getting 20 goals and 10 assists every season, because we all know how unrealistic that is to our side, especially. We don't have players scoring 20 goals every season. We've not had it in a long time. So it's what you do to stay in the team and be dependable. That's what I would say. And if you're dependable and the manager trusts you that you can do the job for him, you're going to stay in the team.
Right, we'll get to part two now, because I want to talk international football. We're itching. You can see both of us are kind of itching, going, we do it. Right, best luck. Well done, Sunderland. We didn't even mention Hull. An amazing time at Wigan. Didn't mention that.
Wigan. A quick mention for Wigan. I probably played the biggest club game of my career at Wigan, that Premier League game against Sheffield United to stay in the Premier League. And we had a great team. We had brilliant players. Emil Heskey, Wilson Palacios, Antonio Valencia, Chris Kirkland. What players we had at Wigan as well, don't forget. So I've got to give that a quick mention there. Yeah.
Give it a mention.
Oh, yeah. See, you've seen a lot, Kevin. You've seen a lot.
Yeah.
You certainly have. And you've seen plenty too on the international pitch. That's what we're going to talk about next.
Yeah. It's there with George Hamilton
and Connor Phillips,
and our guest today, as we found out, has over 1,000 Premier League appearances. It's unbelievable as this number keeps growing and growing. But we have been itching, haven't we, to get stuck into the international scene, haven't we?
Yeah. But it's, here's a man who has really flown the flag over the years. And I have something I remember you saying, Kevin, when there was a bit of a dispute about somebody in your position, born in England, with Irish family, and turned down the chance to play for Ireland, betting on the opportunity that might come with England. And you said at the time, I think I'm right in saying, I would have taken one cap for Ireland above everything else, because I was Irish and that's all that mattered to me. And you got 110.
Yeah, I still don't even know, how to really address that when you're talking about the international scene, George, because it did mean that much to me. It genuinely did, and I said it earlier on with you guys before as well. Playing once was everything. It really was. It just meant so much to me, and I put too much pressure on myself, as I said before, playing in that first game as well.
It's quite lovely with both of yous to look back on that time that was it, and you have to look back on it, I'm sure, Kev, as a success, surely.
A success for us across my international career, Connor. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I think forget about the caps numbers, but what you did.
Yeah. I think we didn't have a good side. We had an excellent team, and probably as much as I grew up watching the sides that you would have been commentating on, George, watching 88, watching 90 and 94. So much talent. I think we probably, my side, certainly around the 98 to 2003 or 4 time, I think we had so much balance within our side. You could make the argument for we were one of the best. I'm not saying we were the best, but one of the best Irish sides in terms of balance, maturity, as well as young talent that was coming through as well, and all coming through at the same time. If I look, from my time when I first came into the setup, the players that were under 23 and 24, Shay Given, Gary Breen, Kenny Cunningham, obviously Robbie and Damien, and players like this. There were so many of us that were, similar sort of age profile. And then we threw in Niall Quinn and Alan Kelly, Steve Staunton, Roy Keane, players like this, all these guys that were the experienced ones around us. We had such a good balance of players and so much talent within the setup that absolutely success, because I'd probably say with the team that we had, and I think it's probably widely regarded now, we did underachieve. We did underachieve as a side. We should have probably had another couple of Euros within us, and absolutely another World Cup within us. But it's just the way that it is, and you look at every individual one,
But I think it is a measure. You mentioned playoffs. It's a measure of the level that the team that Kevin was a part of achieved. Like, there had been playoffs, Anfield 95, 97 was a playoff as well. And then you're in the team, and now there are more playoffs. So if they're not actually qualifying for the finals, they're within touching distance of the final. That's how good they were. They weren't just mid-table, that's another campaign gone. They were almost there consistently. And you put yourselves in that position in 2001 for the 2002 with those 2 games against Iran. I mean, it was experience that the squad had, and it didn't quite work out in Turkey, which for a whole variety of reasons it didn't work out against Turkey in 99. And then to go to Iran, banking the home win, and then having that in reserve to go into a very, very hostile atmosphere and come out the other side and have qualified for Korea, Japan.
What was it like? Because I've watched the many documentaries, and there's stuff on YouTube as well. When Ireland qualified for their first World Cup, I think it was Malta in '89.
Yeah,
they beat to get to Italia 90. What was it like after Iran, knowing you were going to the World Cup in 2002?
Everything and more. Iran was, George would have been there. It was just such a surreal 2-legged games, actually. The Iran game, I'm not saying we were overconfident going into that game, but we genuinely felt we're too good for Iran. We've got too many quality players within our side, and we are going to win this 2-legged game. And we've all watched enough Irish teams over the years to look at it and analyze it. We don't go and blow away sides. It's never happened for us, no matter who it is, no matter even if we've kind of dominated a game and been the better side. We've never been able to go and win 3-4, 5-0 against the side. And I remember Iran at home was quite cagey game. Was it Jason won us the penalty? I think Jason McAteer won us the penalty. And Robbie, I think, scored the second, didn't he? So we won 2-0 and it was comfortable enough, but Shea still had to make a big save in that game just to keep it at 2-0. If we'd have gone over there at 2-1, that would have been a totally different game altogether. We were, wherever we went, if we left the hotel lobby or the hotel room floor, we never left the hotel, but if we left our floor of the hotel, you'd have someone following you down in the lift going on to whatever floor you were going to. It was just so much security around us, and it probably, having that security around us, intimidated us a little bit, to be honest with you. And I'm sure it would have been the same for fans and certainly media, George, out there. It certainly felt a little bit like that. And And I have to say that we never had 1 ounce of bother with any of the Iranian people when we were in Tehran. They were such great people to us. But quite funny with us as well. The ones that we would have spoken to, we're going, and how they were going to beat us. We're going to the World Cup, not you. Just a good bit of banter with us, like we would have done in general ourselves. And the game itself, I mean, it was unbelievable. An unbelievable game in terms of, the crowd that was there. There was over 100,000 at the game. It was a surreal atmosphere, the game. We got to the dressing room after the game. We'd won 2-1 on aggregate, lost the game 1-0. And it was, there was no celebrations, as we know. It was an alcohol-free place. We couldn't be celebrating. We had to wait for the plane to take off. But once the plane got out of Iranian airspace, the champagne was flowing, the beers were flowing, and it was just, I don't know. I think a little bit of a relief for us. We felt as though that after we had Portugal and the Dutch in qualifying for that World Cup, we'd played so well in virtually every game that we played in. Probably Portugal deserved to top the group. I would probably say that, looking back at it a little bit now, because they were the best side. But we certainly give them a run for the money, and we felt as though that whoever played against us, no matter which side that come to Dublin, we would give them a game and we would beat them. We always felt we could beat any team, no matter who it was that come into Dublin. So that came across with us, with the way that we played. Everyone was confident in their ability. Everyone was so in tune with each other in the movements on the pitch, with their abilities or lack of ability, whatever it was. We knew that we had a really, really strong team, and a strong, I'd probably say 30 players at that time. Whoever it was, out of the 23 or 4 that didn't make the World Cup squad there, we had another 10 players that could quite easily come in and not make any difference to our squad. We had such a great pool of players.
Did you have the same situation when you couldn't have a wee glass of wine after the Iran match? Were you waiting on the wheels just to leave?
Well, it was actually, as Kevin says, we had to leave the airspace as well.
Oh,
on the plane on the way out, they weren't allowed to carry alcohol because they would be bringing it into
the airspace.
But obviously they had kind of bent the rules a bit for the return flight, because once we were in free air, it was going to be like that, and it was a celebration like no other. And I think I maybe told the story with another guest, but the plane was actually rocking. The word came through from this is your captain speaking. We're about to enter an area of turbulence. Would ask you please to go and sit down and fasten your seatbelts. There was no turbulence. The turbulence was all in the aircraft. The celebrations, the team up the front, the media in the middle, and the chosen fans down the back. And the plane was literally rocking.
Amazing. Was there many fans in
Iran? I don't think anybody sat down. I don't think anybody sat down when we were told to sit down as well.
No, and it was one of those experiences that it was a delight to have been part of, because all the various segments of it, the going to Iran, what's it going to be like? Then Kevin's described how it was when we came off the plane. So then we arrive in Iran and there's all the security. My measure, when I think of Iran and Tehran and that match, the colour brown comes into my mind. Everything in the hotel seemed to be brown. It was kind of 1970s Moscow-ish. It was all so different, so unusual. You had to look very hard if you were to have any alcohol, and it was going to be a very, very dicey situation that you'd find yourself in. And I hold my hand up and say I didn't try, but I do know that there were those who gave it and pushed it a bit, and did manage to get themselves a little nip here and there. But then, do you remember the ride back to the airport? And the buses were attacked by the Iranian fans because they were so annoyed that this had been lost.
No way.
And all along the motorway, there was broken glass from the buses that they'd gone before us, and they'd attacked the buses with stones and what have you.
The amount of fans that were there, how many are we talking?
A couple of hundred maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a vast influx like anywhere else, because it was so difficult to get to. It would have been expensive as well, and there were visas involved in one thing and another. So it wasn't the normal travelling army by any means.
But you did it.
But there were fans, and it was a transatlantic Airbus was the aircraft. So the FAI party and the media wouldn't have filled it. So there were select fans on the Airbus as well.
So the party happened.
It certainly did.
We were all happy, and we thought, this was going to be the biggest drama that we would have to put up with in the impending years. A bit of an issue, maybe a bush, a crashed window or smashed window. Then proper all hell broke loose during said tournament. Right. We have had Mick McCarthy on this very podcast. I would urge you to seek out the Mick McCarthy episode. Mick has promised to come on tour with us as well if we do take this on tour, which is going to be interesting. But Mick, there is a hesitancy about talking about it, and I can completely understand that. Wasn't there?
Yeah, there was. I suppose we have to say, how was it for you, Kevin?
Well, I think, I know I've spoken to Mick about it since myself, and Mick, and I think as everybody is, everyone is quite, you mentioned there, kind of you're almost thoughtful about the whole incident. It's almost to make sure that it's clear in your own head what actually happened. I've heard a few stories about what happened that weren't necessarily true from people that's actually in the room, as how I remembered it anyway. I've told my side and how I saw it a few times, but I always remember that I roomed with Niall. I always roomed with Niall. We were Sunderland teammates, and Niall and I were close together. And Niall was always late. Niall was late for everything. So
hold on a second. You and Niall Quinn together. And Niall Quinn is the late one.
Well, listen to this, right? I was probably always very punctual, always on time until I met Niall. So Niall turned me big time. Once I was rooming with Niall for 3 or 4 years, that was me. Then I was done. So I then became this person that was quite relaxed about things. If Niall could do it, I could do it. So that was kind of how it was.
So you're putting your how to put this here, your tardiness, that lives within your everyday life, that is completely down to Niall Quinn.
Completely and utterly down to Niall. Yeah, it's Quinny's fault, not mine. It's not mine. Blame. Put the blame elsewhere. That's the way that I would look at that. Yeah.
What time meeting for a pint? I'll see you about 9:10. Okay, see you about 9:10. 5:10. What's this crack? Where's Kev here? Well.
Fashionably late. Is it not fashionably late? Is that the term now?
Oh yeah, yes. I mean, it's fashionably late. It's acceptable.
Sorry, Kev. Forgive me. I cut across you there. You were saying about
but I'll tell you. Yeah, you're probably right in saying that, Connor. Both Niall and I together, it's a recipe for disaster when it's anyone being late. So Niall and I, we were late down for dinner. Say we would have normally at 6:30, 7 o'clock, whatever it would have been. And in the dining room in the hotel in Saipan, there was 3 huge round tables. One that held about I'd say probably 10 on each table. So there was always going to be 23 in our squad, maybe 9 on each table, 9, 18, and there was an extra 3, 4, 5, whatever it would be on the remaining table. So Niall and I were late down for dinner that day, and when we got down for dinner, the other 2 tables were full of all the players. So Niall and I got our dinner, whatever, and sat down, not really paying attention to actually who was in the room at that time. And bearing in mind that we'd known about this story that had been printed in the Irish Times, and we'd known that Roy had said a lot about, and he was very critical of everything with preparations, with obviously kit not arriving and everything that everybody knows about now. But we sat down for dinner, Niall and I, just the 2 of us on this table. And then Roy came down. Now, Roy was never late. Roy was never late under, if you were there, you had to be there at 10 o'clock in the morning. Roy was there at 9:15, whatever. So Roy was never late. So Roy came down after us. Then Roy has his dinner and he comes and sits beside me on my left-hand side. And then Stephen Finnan came down. So Stevie Finnan came down as well at the same time. So there was only us 4 sat at this table. There might have been someone else, I'm not too sure, but definitely Finny, Quinny, Roy and myself were sat at this one round table. And as we're having dinner, Roy says, it's going to go off tonight, And I said to Roy, what do you mean it's going to go off? Yeah, it's going to go off, this story that's in the Times. And I didn't know at the time that Roy and Mick had private discussions. They'd had their own discussions privately about what had happened within it and things like this. There's a lot of debate as to what did happen, but I believe it did. That's the only thing. I wasn't witness to it, so I don't know for sure, but I believe that did happen. So anyway, this has happened and things like that. And I just come back from the cinema that day. Went to the pictures with Jason McAteer and Lee Carsley and Clinton. Actually, we went to watch the Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire. So we just back from the movies watching Spider-Man, came back anyway, sat down for dinner. So as we're finishing off dinner, we get word when you finish your dinner tonight, nobody leaves the room. Mick's coming in. So this is what happened, and that's when Roy said to me, "Sorry, it's going to go off tonight." So anyway, Roy's beside me. We sat down. We're having a chat, the normal chat for dinner. I kind of asked Roy, "What is it all about?" He told me done this piece and things like that. But there was nothing that I didn't think anything out of the ordinary. There might have been an argument, and that had been pretty much the extent of it. Done and dusted. We go to bed and we get up for training the next day. So anyway, just at the end of the meeting, Mick is preparing to come into the room, and I think everybody knows the story about it. But there's would you call them a Hawaiian dancer and dancers and musicians playing the banjo and things like this. I don't even know how you describe them. Anyway, they're in the next room. So Gary Kelly goes out. He doesn't even nobody realizes really what this meeting is going to be fully about. Gary Kelly drags the guitarist and the dancer into the room and go on perform. So they're performing before us, right in front of us, and Gary Kelly's on the table dancing. The lads are on the table dancing, on the chairs, all dancing, singing. Didn't have a clue what song was being played, but everyone's just having a great time and loving life. Really, we're going to a World Cup at the end of the day. It's just doesn't get any better than this. So anyway, then all of a sudden Mick appears in the doorway, and this band's still playing. So Mick, in fairness to him, he allows the band to finish. So he allows the guitarist to finish and the dancer, as you do, to finish up and things like this. The lads are all, and you can imagine the room is hyper at this stage. Everyone's going crazy and whatever it would be. They finish up. Mick says, "Right, thanks, guys." So you leave the room. Mick's all voice anyway. So they leave the room, and then Mick starts the meeting with the lads, and it kind of as Mick would come into the room, everyone like turned to the right to see Mick was up here. And I know I've told you this, Connor, and I've probably said it before, but Roy was here. Roy was like kind of sat on my left. So Roy was on my left shoulder as we turned to Mick that was up above us when we were sat on the tables. And these two, giants of Irish football then were going at it. And there was Niall who was sat on my right a little bit. So Niall was kind of in between, and I was in between Mick and Roy. So Mick was stood up and Roy was on my left, and the two of them were then, when they clashed and they went at it, and everything that was said, and it seemed like it went on forever. It was probably 2 or 3 minutes of abuse, of screaming, shouting, whatever it would be. And then obviously what happened, and you look back at it and you just think, how much could we all have done to prevent it from happening, which we all could have done something. We all could have stopped it. We all could have stepped in and, just diffused the whole situation. Definitely could have done that. It just felt like, to me, I always say it myself, I was probably a little bit inexperienced at international level. When I was probably 24, 25, should have been. I had enough of a voice on me within that group of players to be recognised, I suppose. There were so many others in there. We all probably should have done something, but it just didn't happen. It didn't feel right because of the way that it all transpired.
Just on Roy's thing, like when Roy had the problems and the issues, and obviously there was the issues with the kit and the pitch and the balls. Listen, we all know the situation with that. Did you all wholeheartedly agree with him, or were you kind of like, look, this isn't the World Cup. This is Saipan. This is the bit before the World Cup. This isn't the bit that we need to worry about. Did anyone else sort of stand firmly in his camp and say, Roy's absolutely right? Or was there a little bit of a more relaxed attitude amongst everybody?
Honestly, Connor, that conversation was never really had, because you're forgetting it was just prior to internet. It was just prior to anything. So we'd heard about the story that had been written in the Irish Times. We didn't know to the full extent what had been written. And, I think everyone probably would know the story. There was a fax sent over and it wasn't fully the article wasn't fully sent in this fax that was sent over to Mick. We didn't have the technology around us then. So we never really had that conversation, to be honest with you. We knew that we knew that everyone was, even Mick himself. Mick was pissed off himself, to be honest with you. And I'm sure he said that things hadn't been sorted the way that Mick would have wanted, to make sure that everything was right in terms of the facilities, in terms of the kit and everything else. Mick didn't want it that way either. I don't think anyone did. So Roy never really made his feelings be known in front of anybody. So everything was done quite privately. And I think Mick addressed us all as a team. Look, lads, we've just got to get on with it this way. It's going to be a few days before the kit arrives. Trying to explain to us. And we were all the sort of characters, regardless of anything, that it was just like, lads, come on, this is actually a bit of fun. We can just get on with it our way. This is our way of doing things. We're the Irish side, who nothing is smooth with us. It never has been, as long as I was in the squad, even in the 21s. So, what do? You make the best of a bad situation. And that's what we were trying to do, not necessarily fully realize. And again, that's probably a little bit of naivety on my behalf. If I was a lot older in my career, I know for a fact that I would have probably spoke up for the lads in terms of everything, what happened over there. So it was we were just getting on with it. Again, we were going to a World Cup. We were privileged to be there. That's the way it felt to me. And I was not going to let anything or anyone get in the way of me being at that World Cup. That's the way I felt.
I was in downtown Dublin. I may have told you this before. I was in downtown Dublin, Kevin, minding my own business on a wonderful sunny day when I got this phone call from the BBC in Belfast. And they said, Roy Keane has left the squad. Can you come on and talk about this? And it was the television news at tea time that they wanted me to come on to. And I'm in Dublin in my kind of Hawaii 5-0 shirt for the summer afternoon that was in it. I had to go into Brown Thomas and buy a shirt to go into the BBC to talk about something I didn't know about. They had to tell me what had happened so that I could tell them what they had just told me. You know what I mean?
And you know what, George, for you, you're kind of, you're guessing at the situation, and you're trying to put yourself, that you've been around us all for such a long time. You know what kind of we're all about, and you're trying to put a colour to something that you don't entirely know. And I think everyone that talks about that story that was there or around it, and you would have been around it, George, you've been around us as a squad for enough. We all knew that there was a problem with Mick and Roy for going back before even I was in the squad. It was something that was always spoken about. There was a problem there, and other incidents had happened over the years that there was something that, there was a fractured relationship. That was, so something was probably always likely to happen before I was around or anybody else was around. So this, you're trying to paint this picture for someone that you can't really explain, that it probably wasn't just that. It was more of maybe of a personal thing between the two of them as well.
Yeah.
The first time we met, I was doing like a sportsman's dinner. I was hosting it and you were a guest. And you said something to me. You said something that day that I had never, ever properly thought about before. You said, and it's never left me since, and I've spoke to George about this. You said to me that day, and yes, we had several drinks before that, that it's not Saipan. Saipan was not the World Cup, but we have to genuinely open our eyes to recognising that Ireland should have, not could have, should have gone to a World Cup semi-final.
And at least.
Well, this is, we're sitting here, we're doing this sportsman's thing, and there's lots of people here, and this is kind of this is a nice thing to say in front of people, and we'll have a giggle about it. And then we've talked about it loads since, and it's absolutely true. In the cold light of day, 20 plus years since that, like, it absolutely should, and I don't think there's enough made of that.
Yeah, and to think that, it was a penalty shootout against Spain, the big boys were dealt with. We've talked about this before. The only goal that Germany conceded on the way to the final that year was scored by Roy Keane. Ireland scored the goal against the World Cup finalists. Nobody else managed that until the World Cup final itself when Brazil beat them. It's an astonishing achievement to think of. And again, it puts our guest into a exalted company, because there aren't that many Irish players who played at a World Cup. 3 World Cups Ireland has been at, and here's one of our stalwarts talking to us.
Yeah, And you know what, George, off the back of that, and I know I genuinely believe that. I said that to Connor privately, and you'd have been there, George. I think there was a feeling that we probably underachieved. I go back to the point I made earlier on. Whoever we played against, we felt we'd beat them. We genuinely felt we'd beat them, no matter who it was. And Spain and Germany at that World Cup, we felt as though that we absolutely more than competed in both of those games. Whoever we would have played against, we felt we're going to beat them. Like, no doubt, it was no doubt about it in our minds that would have been the case.
Yeah.
So ultimately, yeah, we felt disappointed because we felt we underachieved going into or coming away from that World Cup. There was a bit of an underachievement, and that was absolutely the feeling off the back of it. There was.
Yeah, it's funny because when you think of Italia '90, which was the first World Cup, and Ireland didn't actually win a match and ended up in the quarter-final.
And you know what, George? Probably England in 4 of the games at that World Cup. If you think in England, Holland, even Romania to an extent, Romania probably would have been more of a 50-50 game, and definitely Italy. Ireland would have been underdogs in all of those 3, potentially 4 games. Not necessarily with a feeling of we can win this, we can go and beat them. Not fully. I think there'd have been a general, if we win this, it's great, but not a genuine feeling of we will win this game. And that's how we felt. And even, 94 against, the Dutch, or going out to the Dutch and beating Italy and things like this. Mexico, obviously losing against Mexico. But there was probably a feeling even in those 4 games that if we win or get something, we've done well. Whereas with us, I think that's what maybe set that World Cup apart, that we've genuinely felt that this is it. We are going to beat them. We're going to. I'm not saying I Connor says that there. Honestly, I believe we should have got to a World Cup final. Not necessarily because if it would have gone to plan, we probably would have played Germany again in that semi. And I honestly believe if we'd have played Germany again, we'd have beat them. I don't think there'd been any fear playing Germany. I'm not saying we would have or whatever. And it's all ifs, and everyone thinks about it, but it maybe sets it back to the original point that you kind of trying to make, I think, here, Connor, of what would have happened if Roy had been there. And he was a difference maker. He was an absolute difference maker no matter who we played against, because he was that good.
Just quickly, do you want to talk about the penalty shootout? Would you prefer not to against Spain?
Of course you can. You can talk about it, yeah.
But did you practice penalties?
Yes, yeah, we did. Every day, yeah.
Were you always going to be one of the 5?
Yeah. Yeah, always. I think confident in my ability. I don't think I missed one in training. I don't know. I can't remember, but I know that a vast majority of my penalties taken during training or after training would have been scored. I would have had confidence in myself, and I think I had the confidence of Mick as well. So yeah, I would have always been one of the 5 if I was on the pitch. Yeah.
What was it like when it comes back at you?
What we're saying about the penalty miss now, are we? Is that what you're saying? The penalty miss from Harty when I missed a chance at that World Cup that I forever think about. If you think about playing in a World Cup, but to score a World Cup goal would have been just incredible. And I missed an absolute sitter. Should have scored. Harty missed the penalty against Spain, and I got the follow up. And oh God, if I've probably been sent that picture of the freeze frame of how I should have scored 1,000 times on social media, different people saying, remember this happened. If I'm having a go at someone for missing a good chance, just remember that this actually happened with Iker Casillas that had dived to his right hand side to save the penalty from Harty, and the ball comes back to me, and I am probably a bit more than 12 yards, maybe 14, 15 yards out, just inside the penalty box. With Casillas out of the game, all I need to do is probably side foot it into the goal, and I've scored. Easy. You do it 99 times out of 100, but that one time I didn't hit it right, and I just shanked it wide. It was a terrible miss. Yeah, terrible miss.
Don't dwell on that.
I'm not dwelling on that. I'm going to dwell on that.
There's been too many.
George Connor dwells on it because he brings it up. That's the problem.
No.
Got to address it before him.
I think I don't think I've ever brought that up. I have far too much respect for the career that you have, and as much as we do spend most of our time taking the mickey out of each other.
I know. Just going back to and again on the penalties, missed a penalty, and people say that that I've covered enough penalty shootouts, as George has covered way more than me. But I've been fortunate enough to go to World Cups and Euro Championships and commentate on penalty shootouts. And even when I'm there in the stadium, or even watching TV, whatever now, and a penalty shootout comes around, and I always think, God, there's got to be a different way. There's got to be something different, because as much as we all love to see them, or everybody seems to love to watch them and things like this, that is some look. What are we now? 20 odd years later, and I'm being asked about it again. Every time I was back in Ireland a couple of weeks ago, and I must have been asked about the penalty shootout against Spain 5 times in Ireland, and I was only there a week, and it was we were back over in the West, we were back over in Achill, and people were just asking me about, oh, Jesus Christ, I remember when you missed that penalty against Spain in the World Cup. And it's just, it lives with the person that misses that penalty for the whole lives. And it's going to live with me forever. And as much as, I can say, well, have you been in a position to take a penalty? That's irrelevant. You've missed a penalty at a World Cup. That's ultimately what people remember me for, I think. No, I'm not. But you know what I mean? It's always going to be brought up. It's always going to be brought up in my whole life that I missed a penalty at a World Cup. And it's as bad as it sounds, it's just it kills me that I missed a penalty sometimes. It does kill you.
And you don't even have the benefit of getting money from a pizza company like Stuart Pearson and Gareth Southgate all those years ago. We don't have as deep pockets.
If I had a euro for every time I was reminded of it, I'd be a rich man, let me tell you.
Here, we're going to finish on an absolute positive, if that's okay. And I did not know this until George told me today. So at the end of every one of these podcasts, we do a commentary from the guest's career, or something similar to it. We've had Clive Tilsley as one of the episodes, and we did something a little bit different. But George made me aware of something that was really lovely today about your career. So we can park the missed penalty, or we can park whatever we want over there. We can park Saipan, because he genuinely does have one of those like rubber stamp moments.
Oh yes, without a question. We're going forward in your career. It's nearer the end than the beginning, Kevin, and it's the qualification stage of the European Championship that Ireland would ultimately reach in Poland and Ukraine, and the period of playing in Croke Park is behind us. The Aviva Stadium has opened. There's a friendly game against Argentina, and it's lost 1-0. There's then the first of the qualifying matches in the Euros, which takes Ireland away. I'm going to have to look this up now because it's simply left my memory. But it was the European Championship, Armenia, and away we went to Armenia to begin that qualification for the 2012 World European Championship. And Keith Fahey scores a goal in Armenia, and 1-0 victory. And so the campaign, you made the point earlier, when Ireland started well in a campaign, it tended to be a good campaign. So we're now back home in the Aviva. There's only been one match in the new Aviva, that friendly defeat by Argentina, only 1-0. And Ireland are taking on Andorra.
I know where you're going now, yes.
And Ireland haven't yet scored in the new stadium. And who scores the first goal for Ireland in the Aviva Stadium?
So if you're listening in Achill, if you're listening in that part of the world and you see Kevin back home in Mayo, please ask him about this moment and not any of the other moments. Would that suit you better?
Yeah, that's very nice. Yeah, very nice. Yeah, very nice moment to have, yes.
So George will be doing the commentary on this. We'll let you relive it before we let you go. I told George the first time I ever saw you, we lived in the same town in Manchester, and you walked past me, and I said to my wife, who wasn't my wife at the time, give her a dig in the ribs and said, "There's Kevin Kilbane. Will I go over and say hello?" And she went, "Oh, don't be that guy. Don't be that guy." And I wasn't that guy. And I was like, "Oh, I didn't say hello. I regret it." And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, the sportsman's dinner we were talking about earlier on, somebody asked me to host this sportsman's dinner, and I was like, I get to have a chat with them. And I just thought it was going to be, we do this little interview up on stage in this bar that definitely didn't allow us to have lock-ins. And I would say it'd be nice to meet you, but we've stayed mates since that.
Yes.
And you're how fond I am of you, and I just, what you did in an Ireland shirt, I was at the games, I was there. I take it right the way forward to when we went to the Liam Miller match in Cork some years ago, and we went for a few pints after it, and all the players were there. And George, if I look at you doughy-eyed sometimes, which I do, right? I was in this bar in Cork, and I was just like, it was just the who's who of the Republic of Ireland team, and I was like, Kev, I need to go home because I'm going to make a fool of myself here.
I do remember that. Yes, that's what you always remember, the stories away from the pitch, don't you?
Yeah. Well, look, thank you for doing everything. Thank you for being available to us. An incredible career in the world of the media that, you know, surpasses a lot of even people like myself and George. You know, it's great. It's great to see. Well, it's great to see you continuously do well. So
let's go back to the Tuesday evening, the 7th of September, 2010. They've had that win in Armenia, and now it's Andorra in the Aviva Stadium. That was magnificent by McGeady, and Ireland have the corner. And it'll be Liam Lawrence to take it. Kilbane lurking at the near post. They're all in there. The big guys are ready for this. Lawrence's corner. Kilbane! A header! And the Aviva has its first Irish goal. And what a man to score it. 107th time to wear the shirt. He deserves that. His 8th international goal. Kevin Kilbane.
Oh, lads. Hey. Thanks for that. Thank you. Well, I don't know. There you go. Do I have to respond to that now?
No. That's if you want, we can leave this podcast there.
That was a nice night, and that's even nicer hearing George say it, honestly, because so many times over the years George would have commentated on us, and obviously growing up over in England, I wouldn't have heard George all that much. But it was so nice to hear George commentating on games when you went back to your hotel after games, to hear the voice, our voice commentating on games. So it was, very special. But for George, for that one, thank you guys. Jesus, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for
Kevin. Great to talk to you, and thanks very much for doing that.